Hey, what's up, guys? This is Ming the Merciless 93 making another video for PokerVIP.com. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to improve your hand reading skills. There's a lot of things that you can do in poker to improve your hand reading skills, and some of them you might not even be aware of. Have you heard of a little word called combinatorics? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. It's hard to say. We've got the old Queen 5 offsuit here, and though we can defend in the big blind quite a bit, we're not going to be defending some offsuit trash combo for the most part, unless it has something going for it. You know, if it's making straights, you know, it's making something happening. Top pair with something, you know, I mean, you flop a 5, you don't really care. You flop a queen, you're out kicked a lot of the time. It just doesn't really do very well, so this doesn't have much playability at all. You're also going to win less often whenever there's like 14 people in the pot. Your implied odds aren't all that great, so we're just going to get the hell out of dodge in that case. And yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about combinatorics as we fold our king 4 in this scenario. So combinatorics is a way for you to estimate how many combinations are in the deck of certain hands, or any hand that you have, really. So let's say the flop texture here of a 9, a 3, and a queen. So how many pairs, or how many combinations rather, of pocket 9s are there in the deck when there's a 9 on the board? Well, you have 3 9s left in the deck. You have the 9 of hearts, and you can have that paired up with the 9 of clubs or the 9 of diamonds. And then you can have the 9 of diamonds and the 9 of hearts paired up. So you can have 3 combinations of 9s. And the reason why this is relevant is because it helps you estimate equity, first of all. It helps you, essentially, it just takes your hand reading and then it makes it insane. Like, it takes your hand reading skills when you're using combinatorics to adjust your decisions, and it makes it absolutely fantastic. So we have a couple of decisions to make here. We could either raise it up, isolate these guys, or we could limp behind on the button. Since this guy is limping under the gun, he doesn't have that much money behind him. I would rather realize my equity, in a sense, just limping on the button, getting to the flop with like an okay hand that isn't all that great. Because if we raise it up, there's a pretty good chance we're not going to get this bluff through because of the number of people that are already in the pot. There's a bigger chance that somebody else does end up calling. There's a bigger chance that he decides to shove because he only has $4. And then if we raise to like $1 and change and then had to fold to a shove, we wouldn't be very happy with that whatsoever. I'll just go ahead and limp behind on the button and then see how this hand plays out. But yeah, so combinatorics, it's a way for you to count the number of combinations of any hand specifically in the deck. So right here we have 10 jack. How many combinations are there of 10 jack in the deck? And we have a 10, so there's 3 10s left in the deck. And we have a jack, so there's 2 jacks left in the deck. 3 times 2 is 6, so there's 6 combinations of 10 jack left in the deck when we have it. Now, this is a board where the guy that limped under the gun might still have a hand like pocket queens, so you can maybe not really rule out, well, now there's just no queens left in the deck. There's only 1 combo, and it's less likely that he limped them. So right now, there's 1 combo of queens, 1 combo of jacks, and 3 combos of pocket 4s, so there's not that many super strong hands on that board texture for the most part. But yeah, whenever you count combinations, you know the maximum amount of a certain type of hand or hand strength that is possible. And that's important because when you're thinking about what your opponent's range looks like pre-flop to get to the flop, this is going to help you weight and estimate what type of a hand they have more frequently than other types of hands. This is also going to help you when you're bluff catching on the river and you have to think about how many bluffs they have in that spot, or when you're constructing your ranges yourself and you're thinking about how many bluffs or how many value bets you need to have, because your bluffs and your value bets, they go together like a combinatorial army. You can't think about them as one part or another, like this is a bluff, this is a value bet. You can define it as such, but it's all related back to the amount of equity that hand has when a certain thing happens. So if you have a hand that would be considered a bluff, it's because it can't do something else profitably other than make somebody else fold a better hand. And we go ahead and we raise it up, and it goes flat call, re-raise, and the first thing you'll notice here is that this guy's made it $3 over the top of a $5 stack. So if we were to call here, it would be pretty dicey in a sense that this guy just might be getting it in, and generally I would say that we're going to just see a lot of big pocket pairs and maybe not too many crazy bluffs. Now that being said, this is, you know, a pretty soft game here on global and anything's possible, so we might have folded the best hand, but I'm willing to just fold here with the king. And it looks like he had king-queen, so we're getting crushed over there. I'm a little surprised he 3-bet king-queen, but not super surprised because he can still get it in against the other dude relatively comfortably. And of course, post flop, I think maybe checking a street is probably your best play there. Let him catch up or whatever else. Like if you're beat by an ace, you're not really going to ever improve unless you hit your queen or your king. So you don't really improve all that frequently in that spot. Not much of a reason to 3-bet here. We're just going to call with our pocket eights. We see a flop of 9-5-5, and we have the heart. This is not a bad board texture for us. It's not amazing. If somebody has a 9, we're definitely drawn pretty thin. We're still going to end up calling a bet. We can still beat a hand like pocket 6s, pocket 7s, and we can also beat flush draws. So we're going to call here, even though we're not super excited about it. We're getting a pretty decent price, and we do have the best hands some percent of the time. We already know this guy over here, Pooch, is relatively loose. He had an ace-6 offsuit in the last hand, and he called that 3-bet, so he could have pretty much anything here. And the 9 is kind of a mixed bag as well. I think we just end up calling, even though we're going to be beat by a 9 or a 5 sometimes. When Chrysler checks, he's probably mostly giving up. Maybe not. He still has his 10s, jacks, queens, kings, and aces combos, and now we'll just get the hell out of Dodge. I don't know what's happening here. I don't know. We're gonna find out, I guess. Somebody's got a 9, I suppose. I can't really see Chrysler check raising the turn with a hand just like pocket jacks, right? He can't be that crazy, right? I mean, maybe he is. But anyway, so combinatorics are going to let you estimate how many combinations there are of whatever hand is in the deck based on the board texture, the hand that you have. It's how it relates. I mean, it relates to everything in poker. It relates to your equity. It relates to what you want to do with certain combos, whether you can do something with a certain combo profitably. It's one of the most important cogs in the wheel of getting better at poker is understanding combinatorics. It's very important. If it's like being, you say you want to get better at poker, you want to say you want to be a chef, right? I want to be a chef. Imagine trying to be a world-class chef, but not wanting to count ingredients, or not getting to the point where you understand how this should be measured, that should be measured. You don't just roll up with a fucking vat of sour cream and just toss it up on a motherfucker. You're not doing that. It's not just like, I got a little bit of the strawberry cream cheese. We'll just throw a few scoops in. Everything is meticulously measured. And that's how you create those world-class recipes. And I mean, don't get me wrong. You got some dudes that are styling on a few, just, bam, bam, little emerald, this and that. And that'll work in poker somewhat as well. But there's no reason not to know the deck inside and out, combinatorially, how many combos there are of this, how many combos there are of that, what exactly that means, and how it functions. And right here, doesn't really have pocket kings. We're going to go ahead and continuation bet. He is relatively loose. We don't need to bet that big because the hands that we're folding here are hands like queen jack, hands like 9-10, hands that don't connect with the board whatsoever. We have an open and a straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. Relatively easy bet for us. But yeah, we'll just start talking about a little bit of combinatorics and get into a little bit more of the hand reading as the flops come up. And yeah, I know I'm a little sloppy with the explanation here, guys, but I just want you to know that combinatorics is very important, and it relates to pretty much every element of poker that you want to get better at when it comes to equity, bluffing, value betting, everything. So right here, you have 9-3-2 with a flush draw. Pocket 9, somebody can easily have 3s and 2s, so there's a full 9 combinations of sets, but we know that we folded a 3. So that means that there's only one combination of 3s in the deck, which means that goes from 9 combinations of possible sets to only 7 combinations of possible sets. And that stuff does add up. All these like little fractions, little fragment pieces of equity, they add up a lot over time, especially when you're playing against better players and the edge is smaller. You're gonna wanna know this stuff. You gotta keep pushing those little tiny edges. Not much else going on there. We have the ace-8 of clubs. Somebody chatting to us? Making a video? Why they know us on here now, apparently. They know us on here. What's this all about? Making a video? Yeah, but you don't want to know what kind of video. It ain't got nothing to do with poker. Who the fuck is this? Now, this dude's just straight up styling, all right? I refuse to believe that that's legitimate. We're going to make it a $120 here with the ace-8. Pooch, I'm assuming, is going to call. He's got an extremely wide range. And again, our cheap c-bet worked last time. I think we'll go ahead and use the same sort of half pot. If he doesn't have anything, we're assuming that he's going to fold. And then when he does call, we're just going to assume that we can just check and he'll have a pair a good bit of the time. He might have something like queen-jack and then float us on occasion. But for the most part, I would say we're probably okay. Now this is kind of a weird spot. I think that we might still be good if we hit an ace or an 8, and we might occasionally have the best hand, but I kind of assume that we don't. I think we're just going to donk it off here and call 1 and try to either hit the ace or the 8. And I think he's just going to check back this river pretty much always. So we're just going to go ahead and lead shove. If he had a better hand, he was shoving, and we were getting stacked anyway. We're doubling him up regardless. Oh God, and he has ace queen. All right, well that didn't work out for us. Like I said, I wouldn't really assume that he has a hand like ace queen in that spot. You'd assume that he would raise it up at some point pre-flop. You would assume that he's not betting it for that price on the turn. But some strange things happen in poker. Definitely some strange things happen in poker. So we're not going to worry too much about that, but generally if he's betting a pair on the turn and he doesn't have 2 pair in the river with an ace, then he's generally going to check back the majority of the time, and that ace is certainly a card where we're going to check call anyway. So if we're going to check call and lose all the time, and he's going to frequently shift his range more towards having it than not, then we're probably better off just shoving ourselves and trying to get him to make a call with a pair that's worse than ours. And when he has an ace or better, we're getting stacked regardless. This is not an amazing board texture in general. We go ahead and bet, and we get called by both players. And you might say, well, I can double barrel this gut shot here, but both players have called. There's a pretty good chance somebody has a queen. A flush draw is not folding. There's not really that many combinations of hands that are folding here. We block some gut shots that would fold, something like a 9-7 or an 8-9. So I think if we're going to be bluffing this turn, King Jack is going to be a slightly better combo to do it with than King 9. And when they both check the turn, maybe it's more likely that they just have draws here. We're just going to get roasted by a 5x or 6x. But the queen is also not a very good card to bluff, because if somebody did have like a queen with no kicker, they're never folding now. And it might be more likely that somebody decides to bluff catch with a 6 or a 5. I think we just have to kind of relinquish this pot. It is a bit of an over c-bet, but it's also not all that bad, especially if your opponents are relatively unknown to you, because they don't know much about you and you don't know much about them. So they don't know if you're over c-betting or not. And, you don't always have to start off over c-betting, especially in a 3-way pot in a loose game. But, I like to feel the table out. Go ahead and toss a c-bet in there. We do have an overcard, backdoor straight draw. Didn't work out this time. Both players called, but that's okay. So, combinatorics. You see this board texture here, 10-10-8 with 2 clubs. Now there's a jack out there as well. How many 10s are in the deck? How many 10s does your opponent have in his range pre-flop? There's 4 of whatever kicker he has. So let's say an ace, right? There's 4 aces in the deck, and there's 2 10s left. So that's 8 combinations of ace-10 that are in the deck right now. Now, if you say, all right, well, he only has suited ace-10. I don't know how we'd know that, but let's just say he only has suited ace-10. Then there's only 2 combinations in the deck. And if you can further narrow that down because you had an ace in your hand that was not of the suit on the board, then that would only be 1 combination. And here we can see the guy in the big blind ended up having 10-3 offsuit. Now I didn't see if that was a raised pot or not, but if it was, boy oh boy does he have a lot of 10s in his range, because you got to figure if he's going to have 10 deuce all the way up, that means there's going to be 8 combinations for every kicker that he has. And these things are very useful because you'll find yourself in spots where you know that you just can't value bet a hand because there's too many combinations of hands that beat you, or you know that you can fold a hand because there's just too many combinations of hands that beat you, or you know that you know what you can do based on the math. And another good example of that would be a board texture like King Deuce Deuce Rainbow. So on a board texture like King Deuce Deuce Rainbow, if you go ahead and continuation bet the flop, your opponent is going to have an absolute ton of pocket pairs and occasionally some ace highs. He doesn't really have that many deuces. He's got ace deuce suited. Maybe he's got deuce 3 suited, depending on his position and how loosely he plays. So he might have a couple of deuces floating around. But if you assume that ace king mostly gets 3-bet, king queen often gets 3-bet, and let's say you have a hand like queen jack, that's going to block his strongest flat calling, or even 10 jack. That's going to, 10 jack probably a little bit better, block his strongest flat calling king X combos, because king 10 and king jack are very often in the flat calling range, and they're often offsuit combos as well as suited. So if you have 10 jack, it's a pretty good hand to just double barrel that board to get him off of those pocket pairs and off of those ace highs. I'll think about it like this just for example's sake. We'll play the kings and then we'll talk about that example on King Deuce Deuce. So we go ahead and raise it up. This dude in the big blind only has 60 cents, which is probably going to limit the action here a little bit, so it kind of sucks for us. But, I mean, dude's name is Drip Steady, and I'm pretty sure that that's exactly what happens. Maybe we get 3-bet by this guy. It looks like he might be kind of a reg. Maybe everybody's disconnected. Disconnected from reality. Disconnected from morality. Come on, man. What is this? Somebody make a damn decision. All right. Here we can go ahead and isolate. We've got a pocket pair. We get folds, it's good. If we get calls, then we flop pretty good equity, or we flop a pretty easy hand to get away from. Not very difficult to play post flop either way. We get called by a couple of dudes. We flop a deuce. Relatively dry board texture. There are some straight draws out here like 7-9, Jack-9. And, of course, there are 6 bigger combinations of sets, but that doesn't really do much for us. Or it doesn't really, it's not going to really change much, basically. And then you look at how many 10s and 8s they can have. They can have all kinds of offsuit combinations here. 10x is going to be 3 10s in the deck times whatever kicker is going to be 12. Well, there's a lot of drama going on. This is ridiculous. We get no action, no value. Everybody's folding. Okay, so on King Deuce Deuce, let's say your opponent calls the flop with his King X combos, Deuce X combos, and then pocket pairs. And for the sake of argument, we'll say that he flats 3s all the way up through pocket 9s. So 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s. That's 7 pocket pairs. There's 6 combinations of every pocket pair in the deck. So there's 42 combinations of pairs. Now, Ace-King gets 3-bet pre-flop, doesn't have it. King-Queen gets 3-bet the majority of the time, rarely has it. King-10, there's going to be 3 kings in the deck and 4 of the 10s. That's 12. So you can have 24, because that's 2 kickers, 10 and Jack. 24 kings, 42 pairs, a couple of stray deuces, which aren't really worth worrying about. And that's it. Maybe if he's got ace-deuce offsuit and he's in the big blind, then that's going to be 4 aces, 2 deuces. So you're going to have 8 combos. But for the most part, that's not going to be too big of a deal unless he's in the big blind for the most part and you're in a tournament like you min raise, something like that. So if you took a hand like 6-7 and you double-barreled that board, it would be worse for you than if you double-barreled with 10-Jack. Not only does 10-Jack have more overcard equity against their middling pairs like pocket 8s, which 6-7 would perform pretty poorly against, but if you double-barrel that board texture, the types of hands that they're going to fold are going to be those hands, like 6s and 7s, exactly. So that is a spot where your 10-Jack blocks the combinations of their best kings. So for instance, let's say king and a jack, again, 24 combos, but when you have a king or a 10 and a jack in your hand, now you're blocking them down to 9 combos each. So you're taking it down from 24 down to 18 combos. So you're taking a full 25% of their combos out of their range that would call your double barrel, which is pretty significant because your bet is going to work an extra fucking 25% of the time when you double barrel there, versus if you double barreled 6-7, which would just block their folding range. So that means that they would have less combinations that were folding, and they would have that full 100% king 10 and king jack. So in spots where you can illustrate combinatorially, and I think we're just going to go ahead and rip it in here, guys. This guy is just definitely squeezed a bit light before. Pocket 8s are a bit of a bluff for sure, but if we can get folds, this is great, and we'll get some flips out of it. And if he ends up having something, I mean, he did it as wide as king-queen, so I think this is a pretty decent spot to just shovel and unfortunately run into aces, so we're going to get roasted. We can't even hit the 8 of clubs, man. This is bad. This is bad. I don't feel bad about that, though. Whenever you see a guy that 3-bets a hand as wide as king-queen in that spot, pocket 8s and pocket jacks are pretty close in the same value because they both have about the same amount of equity versus his value range, which is going to be queens, kings, aces, and ace-king. They have about the same amount of equity. So if you think that he's 3-betting a number of combinations that will fold, then you can pick any of those combinations of pocket pairs that you want to end up using and bluffing with them, essentially. So we're essentially bluffing with pocket 8s, and sometimes we take it down, and then we have a good bit of equity when he just has his ace-king combinations, and we really only roasted when he has aces, and that's the worst. That's the worst result, obviously, that he has aces. But, like I said, pocket 8s and pocket jacks have about the same amount of equity there versus his value range. So then it just becomes the frequency of him having hands that are going to end up folding. I didn't really see what happened on this board texture over here, so we're just going to bluff. Don't do this at home. We're just trying to bluff. He's got an ace. That's fine. I don't even remember what happened in there because we were talking about the other hand. So I just tried to bluff for y'all. That shit didn't work out. All right, so we're going to bring up, and I'm going to show you on a poker stove here. We're going to raise it up on the button with 8-9 offsuit. Okay, so give him a value range of queens plus an ace-king. Here, we'll just do this. This is easy enough. Queens, kings, aces, ace-king. And there's a little bit difference in equity, but there's not much of a difference in equity. And these games are pretty loose, man. Like this is probably one of the worst hands we'd really be c-betting, but I'm going to still do it. We're still going to just go ahead and get in there and have to double barrel on some turn cards if we get called. That's one adjustment I think that you can make in these global poker games in general, is that you can take less c-bet heavy lines and more delayed c-bet lines, just because the games play so loose that you're going to have way less of a success rate bluffing on the flop. But if they check the turn, they're probably check folding to the river a lot of the time, so you can delay double barrel. And if he's checking this river, I guess we're just going to have to go ahead and bluff again. Just get called by like queen deuce or whatever. But yeah, we're gonna go for the bluff. Get him to fold a 7, get him to fold a 4, and we get check min raised on the river. Again, not a strategy you see too frequently, the old check min raise, but we'll just get out of his way. We'll get out of his way. Clearly, I don't have my bearings in these games. All right, we're gonna fold the 9-10 offsuit. But it's important for you guys to realize that when things aren't going your way, you know, whether your decisions are great or whether they're terrible, whatever it is, don't try to evaluate that shit in the moment. Just leave that for review and figure that shit out later. Just focus on the game that's in front of you and play your A game through whatever variance you are experiencing. I don't mind that bluff there with 9 high. I mean, obviously the c-bet is okay. It's not amazing. I don't mind that shove with the pocket 8s against a dude who's already shown himself to be squeezing with a hand like king, queen offsuit. I think that's going to put more combinations that are going to have to fold in his range. Obviously pooch is very loose. It just, you know, for the most part, I think we're doing all right. So yeah, that's what I was trying to show you guys. So you look at pocket jacks here, and we're 2-to-1 dog versus his value range, right? And it's going to be very similar with pocket 8s. You look at pocket 8s, and we have about the same amount of equity. We have less, like a half, just a little taste less equity. So if you look at that spot and you say, well, you dummy, you didn't have at least pocket jacks there. All right, I didn't have at least pocket jacks there. But let's say this. And I wouldn't do that with pocket jacks either, by the way. I would probably just be flat calling with pocket jacks for the most part. But either way, the whole point is, let's say, you know, you've got your queens, kings, aces, and ace king, then guess what? You obviously have the same range, so you have 50% equity for sure. Then you add pocket jacks, which are sometimes going to be in range, and your equity goes down to 47%. But that's not counting the times he folds, which is why jacks is still going to be a fine shoving hand if he's got a bunch of folding combinations. You're denying him equity, and you are definitely making up for that couple of percent that is, you know, outside of your value equilibrium here. So that's perfectly reasonable. And then if we were to add, what is this? We're going to defend the big blind here with our ace-3 offsuit. And we do not flop the ace of spades, so we're going to be getting out of dodge here. We're just going to be giving up, checking, and folding. And we're just going to check this down. So yeah, and you see that we have the 47% there. Now, if we go to pocket 8s and we just add one combination of pocket 8s, we're going to go from 47 to 46.7. So it's like 0.3. We might win here with ace high, folks. Oh, nope, that guy got a deuce on the river. Motherfucker. All right. So as you can see, for every combination of pocket 8s, it's just a very small fraction of a percent. So if you were to just occasionally sprinkle in the bluff like we did with an 8s combo there, and you don't do it that frequently, just in a good spot or where you know a guy is 3-betting, you know, pretty sure that he's 3-betting enough, you're really not shifting your equity to very negative very frequently there. Now, if you started just shoveling in with every pair all the way down to like pocket 6s, then you're going to see a drastic decrease in your equity. But if you'll notice, it's still only like 6 or 7%. It's not all that crazy. And the reason why is because pairs retain their equity very well, because they still have 20% against over pairs, and the over pairs are about the same amount of combinations as ace king. So if you're ahead of ace king and you are just 20% against the fucking over pairs, there's 18 combinations of over pairs and 16 combinations of ace king. Now, yes, the math changes whenever they have something like jacks in their range, you know, the more combinations of middling pairs, you can shift the equities around. But for the most part, your pairs, even if you had all the way down to deuces, you'll certainly see a decrease in equity for sure. But it doesn't go lower than 40% if you have all these combos, because they don't have you're essentially, you're either behind with only 20% or you're flipping against their ace kings, and they have ace king almost as frequently as they have the bigger pairs. So you end up not doing as poorly as you think. So even if you were to shovel a few of those pocket pairs like we just did with eights, you know, you're not really ruining much of anything if they have folding combinations. And we've already seen that guy squeeze with king queen, so it's pretty reasonable to assume that he's still capable of having hands that 3-bet fold, and we get to take down that dead money that's in the middle as well. So it ends up being a pretty solid play. It's not something you're going to do all that frequently. You don't find that many opportunities, but when it does happen, don't fret if it doesn't go your way, because you're not really shifting your equity down too much. And if you know, if you have a guy who's never bluffing pre-flop and he only has value combos, clearly you don't want to do that. Clearly, that's not what we're trying to do. This is definitely one of those spots where I think I'm just going to take the check, because we've got two players calling. We have a very low equity hand. The flush draw is out there, and we're going to get called by a flush draw. We're going to get called by a jack. We're going to get called by a fucking ace. We're going to get called by everything. We're only going to make them fold small pairs. Now, if they both check the turn, I'm probably just going to go ahead and double barrel, and I'll probably just go ahead and assume that they're not going to have too many ace-x combos here, that they're mostly going to have something like a jack or a 6, mostly. And when he's leading this river, he wants me to believe that he has 6x of hearts here, or he hit 2 pair in the river. Now, we block 2 pairs and sets on in this spot on the river, and he might just be trying to get the showdown with ace-x combos. I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and shovel it here, because it's pretty difficult for him to have a flush and have checked twice. This is definitely not something you should do very frequently. And we get called by 9-10 of hearts. So as you guys can see, how do we only rebuy? That's not all we have in our account. What is this? We had more than this in our account. What is this? We're busting our account. What the hell is happening here? Oh God, sorry about that, guys. We'll go ahead and take care of it after this. But yeah. So the reason I shoved that river is because it's pretty difficult for him to have a flush there, because a lot of his flush draws are going to be betting on the turn. Now again, this is a spot where we're playing on global poker. The players are passive, and he's just check calling with 10 high flush draw on the turn and then leading the river when he gets there. So definitely try and be careful, because these guys will play passively and do things that don't make a lot of sense. Now, that bluff might look like a complete idiot bonehead bluff, but if my opponent just has an ace-x combo there, it's a pretty good spot, because he's not going to call that frequently. And maybe he does. Maybe he just leads the river, and then he calls a shove with an ace, and we should have just never had a bluff there. We should never bluff, and we should just always get paid off. And that's perfectly reasonable as well. But yeah, I would say that these games are definitely soft, and we have to kind of adjust to the way the games play. So if that's going to be the way the games play, we have to be aware of that, because everything that I did right there was predicated on the idea that my opponent wouldn't have that many flushes other than occasionally jack-x of hearts or 6x of hearts, a pair, and a flush draw that would make sense to check the turn with. But in reality, we're just seeing a game where the players are passive in nature, and he just went ahead and checked with a 10 high flush draw on the turn, probably because he quote-unquote didn't have anything, and then he led the river when he got his flush. So we have to be careful. He overbets here. We flop 2 pair. It's a pretty wet board. We're just going to go ahead and raise it up with our 2 pair and hope he just has a jack that we get in it against. And obviously, we're not going to be able to do much here. If he's got a better hand, he's got a better hand. And it looks like we're going to go ahead and hold. So we get it back. We bluff it off, but then we get it back. Oh, it's funny. All right, we're going to go ahead and defend with the 8-9 offsuit combo. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm not really sure what that was about. I don't keep a lot on here, because I just play on here for the most part to make videos for you guys. And I don't think we've lost that much on here. I had at least 5 buy-ins. Either way, we'll rectify this before the next video either way. But yeah, so back to this, you know, you're not really, with pocket pairs, decreasing your equity that much. Now let's go ahead and take all the pocket pair bluffs out of here, and what if you were to start bluffing with a different combination? What if you were to start adding king queen suited? In king queen suited, you're gonna well, hold on a sec. We're gonna see our equity go up anyway right here, right, 47. But as you can see, when you add some combination of dominated Broadway combos, you're losing way more equity. A pocket pair, we lose 0.3, and this this hand right here, we're losing more than that. We're losing 2% equity because it doesn't play as well because of the pairs that they have and the domination issues. This ends up being a way worse combination. So it's definitely a little bit more difficult if you're not entirely sure of what their range looks like or what their frequencies are to be bluffing with these types of combinations. Even something like ace-queen, which is still going to be slightly better, it's still, it's not all that great. You lose a higher percentage of equity very quickly. We're going to call here with our gut shot, and then we're just going to give up. And over here, ace-6-7 rainbow is a pretty dry board texture. We are definitely going to bet. We're in a four-way pot. We're just to get value from straight draws like 4, 5, 8, 9, worse ace-x combos. Now we're just going to check and give up here with the ace-deuce. Not much else we can do. And that is a card which is a mixed bag. Yes, your equity is going to change here because 9, 10, and 4, 5 both get there. He could also have a hand like 8, 9, and he could also have a hand, just any of those straight draws, 8, 9, 8, 10, whatever else. I think I'm just going to check back here and call a river bet. There's definitely a little bit of an opportunity cost letting your opponent realize equity, but on a turn card like a specific 8, where you can have from the big blind all of the everythings, like you can have all of the 9, 10s, and you can have all of the 4, 5s, and here I can't tell you what the bottom of his value betting range is. He's probably never bluffing, so he probably has a mixed range between 4, 5, 9x, and then ace-x. So we're just going to go ahead and call, getting 4 to 1. And unfortunately for us, he has a set of 7. So in a way, we got away from it relatively cheap. But yeah, that's going to be video 1, guys. I will catch you guys for the second part. Hope you've enjoyed this one in just a little bit here.